someone ripped my sister's face out of our family album. The paper is old and soft at the edges, but the tear is violent, fresh-looking, like anger can stay sharp for 50 years. And if you're wondering why I'm telling you this now, it's because I finally found what was hidden behind the photograph. My name is Margaret. I'm a grandmother now, hands that shake a little when the weather changes, voice that gets quieter when a memory gets loud. And today, I'm going to tell you who that missing woman was, why my family erased her so completely that even her name became forbidden, and what it cost all of us to pretend she never existed. Because a torn photograph doesn't just remove a face. It teaches everyone else to disappear a little, too. This started on an ordinary afternoon, the kind you don't think will change the rest of your life. I was at my kitchen table with an old album, the heavy kind with black paper pages and those peeling, clear corners that never quite hold. My granddaughter had asked for family pictures for a school thing, and I said yes like it was nothing. But my fingers were stalling. Not because I didn't want to share, because I knew where the wound was. Halfway through the album, there's a page I always turn too fast. And there it was. A group photo. Summer. A backyard. Everybody squinting into the sun. My mother in a sleeveless dress, my father holding a glass like he owned the world, my brothers looking bored, and one woman standing at the edge, her shoulder still there, her hair still there, but her face gone. The tear wasn't neat. It had teeth. It looked like somebody started careful, then got furious halfway through. My granddaughter leaned in and said, "Grandma, who is that?" And the answer rose up in me like a swallowed scream. Because in my house, growing up, that question got you punished. Not with a spanking, not always. Sometimes worse. With silence. With a look that told you you'd stepped on a grave. I said, "That's nobody." And even as I said it, I hated myself for how easy it came out. So I did something I've never done in front of anyone. I slid my fingernail under the corner of the torn photograph, careful, like I was lifting a bandage. And that's when I felt it. A second layer. A thickness that didn't belong. Something had been tucked behind it. Hidden like a heartbeat. If you've ever been afraid of what you might find in your own family's past, you'll understand why my hands went cold. Because I already knew, nobody tears a person out of a picture for a small reason. I pulled out what was hidden there. A folded letter, thin, onion skin paper, creased so many times it looked tired. And on the outside, in a handwriting I would recognize even in the dark, were 2 words, "For Margaret." My sister wrote it. The sister we erased from time. Before the erasure, before the torn paper and the forbidden name, my sister had a laugh you could hear through walls. Her name was Evelyn. And in my memories, she is always in motion. She'd come into the kitchen humming, rolling her sleeves up like she was getting ready to fight the whole world for fun. She wore cheap perfume that smelled like lilacs trying their best. And she had this habit, Lord, it used to make my mother crazy, of tapping her fingernails on the table when people lied. You couldn't fool Evelyn. Not for long. When I was little, I used to sit on the back steps and watch her practice signing her name. Evelyn Harper, she'd write, over and over, in a notebook she kept hidden inside a cookbook. Like she was trying to prove to herself she existed on paper, even if the world wouldn't make room. She wanted to be a nurse. Not because it sounded pretty, because she liked the truth of it. The plainness. Blood is blood, pain is pain, whether you're rich or poor. My father didn't like that. My father liked things that looked clean from the street. He wasn't a monster in the way stories like to make men. He was worse in a quieter way. He believed his reputation was a living thing, and the rest of us were supposed to feed it. At dinner, he'd talk and we'd listen. My mother would keep her eyes on her plate, pushing peas into little tidy piles like order could save her. And if Evelyn asked a question, an honest question, my father would pause with his fork midair. That pause was a warning. "Don't start," my mother would whisper, not looking up. But Evelyn always started. Not to be cruel. To be real. One night, my father announced that his brother Raymond, Uncle Ray, was coming to stay for a while. Family helps family, my father said, like it was a rule carved in stone. I remember Evelyn's tapping nails. Tap. 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 And the way her eyes went to my mother, like she was checking if my mother would finally say something. My mother did not. Uncle Ray arrived with a suitcase that smelled like cigarettes and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He called me sweetheart in a way that made my skin feel too tight. And when he stood behind you, you could feel him before you saw him. Have you ever met someone who makes a room feel smaller? That was him. The first time I remember being afraid in my own house, it wasn't a scream or a slap. It was Uncle Ray's hand on my shoulder as I washed dishes, too heavy, too long. My mother was in the living room. My father was at work. Evelyn was upstairs. And I didn't say anything, because in our family, you didn't make trouble. But Evelyn saw. She always saw. That night, she came into my room and sat on the edge of my bed without turning on the light. She said, "Did he touch you?" Her voice was steady, but her hand was shaking as she tucked my blanket under my chin. I didn't answer. I just stared at the ceiling like it might tell the truth for me. Evelyn nodded anyway, like my silence was enough. And then she said something I will never forget. She said, "If anyone tells you to keep it quiet, they're protecting the wrong person." 2 days later, I heard my sister screaming in the kitchen. I ran to the doorway and saw her standing across from my father, holding his wrist like she was stopping him from hitting someone. My mother was against the counter, pale as flour. Evelyn said, "He can't stay here." My father said, low and deadly, "Watch your mouth." Evelyn didn't blink. "I'm watching your house." And then, this is the part that changed everything, she said Uncle Ray's name and the word nobody in our family ever said out loud, "Police." My father's face didn't go red. It went empty. Like a door shutting. Upstairs, my mother whispered to me. But I stayed in the doorway, because some part of me knew, this was the moment our family would be split in two. My father stepped closer to Evelyn until they were almost touching. And he said, "If you bring shame into this house, you will not be my daughter." Evelyn answered, "Then stop acting like his brother matters more than your children." I didn't know it then, but that sentence is what got her erased. It happened at my cousin Lila's birthday party. A bright afternoon with cheap balloons, lemonade, and adults pretending everything was normal. Somebody took a picture in the backyard, one of those quick, careless snapshots. Evelyn stood at the edge of the frame, like she already knew she didn't belong anymore. I remember her looking straight at the camera, unsmiling, like she was leaving evidence. 3 nights later, my father called us into the living room. The album was on the coffee table like it had been summoned. My father flipped through pages with a rough thumb, stopping on that backyard photo. Evelyn was in the kitchen doorway behind him, hair pulled back, face tired. He held the album up so we could all see it. Then he said, "This is the last time you will see her in this house." My mother made a sound, not a word, just air breaking. One of my brothers shifted like he wanted to vanish into the couch. And Evelyn. Evelyn didn't plead. That's what I remember most. She only said, "You're choosing him." My father looked at her like she was dirt on his shoe. He said, "I'm choosing this family." Have you ever heard someone use family as a weapon? That's how it sounded. Then he put his fingers on her face in the photograph. Right on the printed smile she wasn't even wearing. And he ripped. Slow at first, like he wanted us to understand every inch of what he was doing, then harder when the paper resisted. The sound was small, but it filled the room. He tore until her face was gone. Then he tore again, just to make sure. My mother didn't move. She didn't tell him to stop. She just sat there with her hands folded so tight her knuckles went white. And my father said the rule that became our family religion, no one speaks her name. Evelyn exhaled once, like she'd been punched. Then she turned and walked to the hallway. I followed her with my eyes and saw a suitcase by the door. Not packed carefully. Thrown together. She paused with her hand on the doorknob. And without looking back, she said, "Margaret, come here." My father barked my name like a command. I stayed frozen, 8 years old, caught between my sister and my father's shadow. Evelyn waited one more second. Then she left. The door clicked shut, and it was like the house inhaled and decided not to breathe out again. That was the public break. But the private truth, the truth my father never let us speak, didn't match the story he told the world. Because the official story became this: Evelyn was unstable. Evelyn was ungrateful. Evelyn ran off. And whenever I tried to remember her laugh, I'd hear my father's voice over it like dirt thrown on a grave. Years passed in scenes that looked normal from the outside. But inside, the missing space followed us like a cold draft. Christmas morning, my mother set out plates, then quietly put one back in the cupboard. No explanation. Just a plate returning to darkness. Easter, my aunt, my mother's sister, once asked, "How's Evelyn doing?" My father didn't answer. He stood up and walked out of the room. Everyone watched their hands. The ham got cold. A few years later, I brought home a school project, a family tree drawn in green marker. I'd left one branch blank because I couldn't make the math work. My father saw it and said, "Fix it." I said, "I need the name." He stared at me so long my cheeks burned. Then he said, "You don't." Isn't it strange how a family can demand loyalty to a lie? How they can call it peace. When I got married, I sent invitations with my mother watching. She never once suggested Evelyn's name. But the night before the wedding, she came into my room and smoothed my veil with trembling fingers. And she whispered, so quietly I almost thought I imagined it, "You look like her." Then she left before I could ask, "Where is she?" At my father's funeral, there were 2 empty spaces in the front row. One was for my father. The other, nobody named it. But I felt it like a bruise. All those years, I kept the album. And I kept turning the torn page too fast. Because some part of me believed the lie would crumble if I stared at the hole too long. So why did I keep it at all? Because the tear proved she existed. And I needed proof, even when I didn't have courage. After my husband passed, I started clearing drawers the way older people do, like we're trying to lighten what our children will have to carry. That's when I found the shoebox. Inside were small things I didn't remember keeping: a lipstick case with a dent, a nickel bracelet with the initials E.H. scratched inside, and a postcard with no stamp, as if it never made it out. And underneath all of it, the letter addressed to me. The same letter I'd just pulled from behind the torn photograph. I unfolded it like it might break. And I read words my sister had been speaking into silence for decades. Evelyn wrote, "Maggie, I'm sorry they told you I left because I didn't love you." My throat closed on the name she used for me, Maggie, like her voice had reached through time and touched my cheek. She wrote, "I left because I wouldn't let him hurt you." And right there, my hand started shaking so badly the paper rattled. Because she didn't write Uncle Ray. She wrote him, like even on paper she was afraid of what a name could do. Then she wrote, "I tried to tell Mama. I tried to tell Dad. They chose quiet." She wrote, "If you ever wonder why the picture is torn, it's because a torn face is easier than an untorn truth." Can you imagine being so alone that you have to hide your love behind a photograph? At the bottom of the letter was an address I didn't recognize. And a line that made my stomach drop: "If they ever ask, tell them I didn't run. I was pushed." So I did what I should have done 50 years ago. I went looking for her. First, I drove to the old neighborhood. Most of the houses looked smaller, like they'd shrunk from shame. A new family lived in ours, but across the street, Mrs. Carver still sat on her porch, older, yes, but with the same sharp eyes. When I said, "Do you remember Evelyn Harper?" her face changed. Not confusion. Recognition. She didn't invite me in right away. She asked, "Is your father dead?" When I nodded, she finally opened the screen door. Inside, she poured tea with hands that didn't shake at all. And she said, your sister tried to save you. The room felt like it tilted. I said, you knew? Mrs. Carver snorted softly. The whole street knew something. We just didn't know what to do with it. Then she told me the part my family buried. Evelyn had gone to the police station. Not once, twice. Some families don't break, they quietly erase the cracks. I left her house with my ears ringing. But I still didn't know where Evelyn went after that night with the suitcase. So I called my brother Thomas. He's the oldest now, the one who learned my father's silence like it was a language. When I said, I found a letter from Evelyn, he didn't ask what it said. He said, you need to put that back. Isn't that something? Not, are you okay? Not, what happened to her? Just, hide it again. I said, Thomas, why was the photo torn? And for a long time, all I heard was his breathing on the line. Then he said, because Dad didn't want anyone asking why she left. I said, why did she leave? His voice went thinner. Because she wouldn't shut up. And then, quieter, almost like he was confessing to the wall, he added, because she was right. That was the first time anyone in my family admitted it. Here's the truth, plain and ugly and overdue. Evelyn didn't get erased because she did something shameful. She got erased because she refused to let shame stay hidden. My father demanded silence. My mother obeyed it because she thought obedience was survival. My brothers learned it because boys learn quickly what a powerful man rewards. And Evelyn refused. After she went to the police, my father made his own kind of call. Not to help her. To control her. Mrs. Carver told me there was a car that came for Evelyn one morning while my father was at work. 2 men and a woman in a plain coat. They spoke softly, like they were handling something delicate. Evelyn went with them without screaming, because screaming never helped in our house. They took her to a hospital, to rest. That's what my mother told the neighbors, eyes down, hands busy. But the truth was simpler, they needed a label to discredit her. Unstable. Hysterical. Anything that made her words disposable. Evelyn got out weeks later. And she left town the same day. Not because she stopped loving us, because she realized love wasn't safe in a house that protected harm. She worked under a different last name. She sent letters that came back unopened. And eventually, the letters stopped. I found out why at the county records office, sitting under fluorescent lights that made everyone look guilty. There was a death certificate. Not dramatic. Not cinematic. Just paper. Evelyn passed away at 42. 'Cause listed in dull ink, as if the world couldn't be bothered to understand a life it had helped ruin. And the address on the certificate matched the one in her letter. A small apartment over a laundromat. I sat in my car afterward and cried until my chest hurt. Not just because she was gone. Because she'd been gone for years while we were eating holiday dinners and pretending the missing chair didn't mean anything. So ask yourself this, if you can erase a person for telling the truth, what does that do to everyone who stays? I brought the letter to my children. Grown adults with mortgages and gray hairs of their own. Still, I felt like I was about to get in trouble. We sat in my living room. The torn photograph was on the table between us, like evidence at a trial. My daughter read Evelyn's words and covered her mouth. My son stared at the floor so hard I thought he might bore a hole through it. Then Thomas, my brother, showed up uninvited. He stood in the doorway and said, "I knew you'd do this." I said, "I'm doing what we should have done." He snapped, "For what? So we can feel bad? So we can dig up Dad and spit on him?" My daughter asked, "Did you know?" Thomas's jaw flexed. He said, "I knew enough to keep my mouth shut." And that's when something in me finally burned clean through fear. I said, "That's not loyalty. That's cowardice." Silence slammed down. My son finally spoke, voice rough. "Grandma, did he hurt you?" I looked at my hands. Hands that have kneaded bread, held babies, washed dishes in 100 different kitchens. And I said, he tried. And Evelyn stopped it. Thomas's face changed then. Not anger, grief, startled awake. He whispered, we all knew she was protecting you. He swallowed. We just let Dad win. What do you do with that kind of inheritance? A family legacy made of missing names and swallowed truths? I didn't want revenge. I wanted restoration. So I did something small, and it felt like the biggest thing I'd ever done. I took the torn photograph to a local shop, the kind with scanners and careful hands. I brought another picture too, Evelyn at 16, smiling despite everything, hair curled and pinned back. The technician said, we can rebuild this. Not perfectly, but enough to see her again. When the restored print came back, I stared at it for a long time. Her eyes looked like mine. Her mouth was set like she was holding a truth she refused to drop. I framed it. And under the frame, in my own handwriting, steady for once, I wrote, Evelyn Harper. My sister. Then I did the part that frightened me most. I said her name out loud in my house. Once. Twice. 3 times. Not as a curse. As a return. Because here is what I learned too late, pretending someone never existed doesn't protect you. It only protects the people who needed darkness. A week later, my daughter brought my granddaughter over. They stood in front of the framed photo. My granddaughter said, she looks brave. And I said, she was. My daughter asked, do you forgive them? I didn't answer quickly, because forgiveness isn't a pretty bow you tie on a wound. I said, I forgive Evelyn for leaving. I forgive myself for surviving. And I'm still deciding what to do with the rest. If you're listening to this and thinking about the things your own family won't say, ask yourself why. Who benefits from the silence? Who pays for it? The truth doesn't destroy families, secrets do. And if this story moves something in you, please tap like. It helps more people find these quiet histories. And if you want more grandmother-style, slow-burn stories about hidden pasts and the things families bury, subscribe to Dust of Old Days. One last thing. That torn photograph? I kept the original too. I didn't throw it away. Because the tear is part of the story. It's proof of what was done. And now, it's proof that the erasure didn't win. So if you ever find a missing face in an old album, don't turn the page too fast. Sometimes the person they tried to erase is the one who loved you most.